Hey guys, my name is Gabby, welcome back to my channel, and today I wanted to film a book talk for The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. This is a book that I just finished reading 2 days ago, and it was a 5-star book for me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and I've kind of made it a goal for myself this year for like any book that I give 5 stars to. I want to try and make a full book talk. Sorry if this video is just kind of like all over the place. I didn't write any notes. Beginning part of this is going to be spoiler free, and then I'll warn you before I jump into some spoilers. This edition of the book is the Book of the Month's Book of the Year dust jacket. If you didn't know, Book of the Month has a contest every year for all of their selections that they've chosen throughout the year. For 2017, this book won Book of the Month's Book of the Year contest. The other books that were in the top 5 were Little Fires Everywhere and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and both of those books I gave 5 stars to, so I was super interested in reading all the 5 from the top 5. And now this one is also in the top 5 and it won, and I gave 5 stars to this one. And so I'm really hoping to read Beasts of Extraordinary Circumstance and Sing Unburied Sing, which is the other 2 that were in the top 5, and hopefully they'll all be 5 stars. Like, they're all so good. So basically, if you didn't know what this book is about, it's a literary fiction, historical fiction novel that takes place in Ireland in the 1950s. It follows this man named Cyril Avery from his conception all the way through the rest of his life. Starts with Cyril's birth mother, Catherine Goggin, and she is living in Ireland and she gets pregnant when she's a teenager, and she gets banned from the church, and like this was a really big deal in the 1940s to get pregnant as a teenage girl and outside of marriage, and you know, all this, like, it was a huge scandal, and she got banned from the church. And so she moved to Dublin, and where she met these 2 guys named Sean and Jack, and they kind of like take her in. From that point on, Cyril is the son that she gives birth to, and then the rest of the story follows from Cyril's point of view. Cyril gets adopted at a very young age by this couple named Charles and Maud. He never really feels like a real Avery, and they constantly tell him like, you're not a real Avery, you're just our adopted son, like don't get any ideas, you know. And the main thing that this book focuses on is the fact that Cyril is a gay man, and he realizes that he's gay pretty early on in his life, and he struggles with LGBT rights in Ireland because, you know, being gay in 1950s Ireland was illegal. The priests really like run the country, and so whatever they say goes, and they're definitely against gay people in 1950. So his fight for LGBT rights is a very dominant part of this story. It takes up most of the story, and it's really hard to read this sometimes because a lot of the people in Ireland in the 1950s are very homophobic, and just like their whole society and the church and everyone is just very homophobic, and so it can be very hard to read the language used in this book at times. I know it was for me. But I also think that the story is incredibly important because it not only talks about the LGBT rights and the battle with that in Ireland, but it also even spans to like the 80s in New York City and the problem with AIDS and the AIDS epidemic, and how a lot of people like blamed the gay people and said it was their disease and like it was their fault basically that AIDS was such a huge epidemic, and the controversy with all of that. And I was fascinated by all the topics that this book was able to cover. It's just a very, very powerful, moving story, and I just got so engrossed in these characters' lives. Like, I fell in love with Cyril, even though he does make mistakes and he's a very flawed character. He's just so complex and lovable. I really adored him so much throughout this. And even though this book does deal with some very dark, sad trauma and things, it's also very happy. It's like a very bittersweet story because there are some very hilarious moments, like some of the sarcasm. Like, Cyril just has a really great sense of humor, and so his sarcastic comments and his like sarcasm in his head is just really great, and it balances so well with the more tragic things going on in his life. I fucking love this story. I love it so much, and it's so beautiful. This book is just amazing. I am going to jump into some spoilery content now, so if this at all sounds like something you'd like to read, you know, I would definitely recommend it to people who enjoy literary fiction and historical fiction, which isn't something that I even thought I enjoyed, honestly. Like, I just started getting into like more literary fiction and historical fiction this year. I completely get it if you're putting it off because you're like, whoa, I don't read books like that, but like, seriously, this book is just incredible. It took me a week to get through this. It's almost 600 pages and it's just very dense. It's such a damn good story, you know, and this isn't one of those books where they spend like 20 pages describing the color of the sky, you know, like it's not one of those literary fiction novels. It's just a really fast-paced, beautiful story about Cyril's entire life. You just get to witness his entire life from the moment he was born until the end of his life, and it's so beautiful, and it'll definitely pull on your heartstrings, and you'll fall in love with these characters, and you'll just be like, so I highly, highly recommend it to everyone. And yeah, so if you haven't read it, just go and read it and then come back and talk about it with me and talk about all the feels. Yeah, so last warning, spoilers ahead. Click away if you haven't read it yet. Spoilers. Right from the beginning, I knew that this book was going to be like a sucker punch to the gut because it starts with his mom, Catherine Goggin, and she lives with these two guys named Sean and Jack. Oh my god, it's just so sad in the beginning. Sean's dad comes in and beats the living shit out of Sean and Jack, and Sean dies that night, and Jack somehow miraculously lives, and Catherine gives birth to the baby while he's getting beaten to death on the floor, and like, that scene was just so intense, and like, what a horrific way for Cyril to like come into this world. I love his first meeting with Julian when they were kids. Julian was a very vulgar kid. Like, I was surprised. He was very obsessed with sex at a very young age. Like, he was only 7 years old and he was all like, show me your thing, you know, like, it was just very, like, he's very in your face because Cyril thinks that he's gay from the moment he's like 7 years old and he meets Julian. He thinks he might be like in love with him. First time when he goes to confess it in the church, he goes into the confession booth and he starts talking about how he thinks about boys more than he thinks about girls and how he thinks he might be gay and whatever, and the priest literally has a heart attack and dies. I find it like interesting that this book did point out a lot of the hypocrisy within the church and how the priests are the ones who are like preaching that being gay is wrong, but then they always end up being the ones who are like molesting the little boys, and they're always the ones who are like covering the fact that they are gay themselves. And like, I like that one quote that is said in this book, I don't remember where it was, but when he said, "We hate what we fear in ourselves." This book killed me with how many times Cyril and his birth mother actually crossed paths and like they just never knew who they were to each other. Oh my god, like the first time is when he's in her like tea room or whatever drinking with Julian, and then like their second interaction is when he's getting like beaten up by these guys for being gay, and then she saves him and brings him into her tea room and she's like, "Are you one of them?" And he's like, "What?" And she's like, "Are you gay?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he like, that's the first person he said it aloud to like ever. She didn't like have a negative reaction to it for like the first time in his life. He's never like seen someone be accepting of it, and he's just like, "Wait, like you're okay with it?" And she's like, "Why wouldn't I be?" Oh my god, like not only is this so important for him to see that somebody accepts him, but it's his mom, like, and he doesn't even know it's his birth mother. Ugh. That one bitch, Mary Margaret, that was like his first girlfriend. Oh my god, she literally drove me insane when she discovered that he was gay, and she's like, "Oh my god, I didn't know." She's like, "I knew there was something wrong with you, but I never knew that you were a dirty queer." Like, can you not, bitch? Like, are you fucking kidding me? The fact that she would be like, "That is not my standard at all." Like, I don't give a fuck about your standard. Like, she literally said that like 50 million times throughout this book. She was driving me insane. That's not my standard. Okay, the part that shocked me the most in this book is when Cyril was going to get married to Julian's sister Alice. I was like, why? Him and Alice actually did have a super cute connection, you know, and it seemed like they could be really close friends if only he just like told her. And I know it's like he had so many opportunities to tell her and he just never could, which I understand, but then also like it was just sad because like he waited to tell her for so long and he like lost his virginity to her. It was still like a controversial thing in the day, back in this day, to like have sex before marriage, and so she wanted to do it with him though before they got married. So then the next time he runs into his mother again is when he's at the like train station waiting to get married, and he sees Catherine Goggin, and then she has her little boy Jonathan, who's her son that she gave birth to, and like little did he know that that was his freaking stepbrother. It's just so beautiful because he was like, "Oh, he's an amazing kid," and like that whole conversation was so beautiful and amazing. And then like literally later that day he's going to get married to Alice, and then he like confronts Julian and tells him that he's gay and that he's like in love with him. Oh my god, the timing was just so bad. Like Julian's reaction was so terrible. He like punched him and shoved him up against a wall and was like, "Oh my god," and he's like, "I don't have a problem with you being gay, but like you can't do this to my sister on her wedding day." It was just so sad because I feel like no matter when he told Julian, Julian would have had a bad reaction about him being gay. I just like, I can feel that, you know? Cyril has that moment where he feels like he wants to like kill himself like right after that because Julian basically forced him to still get married to his sister because he's like, "You're not gonna do this to her again," you know? And then he finally just decides to like leave forever because he can't be in this country anymore, and moves to Amsterdam, and he meets Bastian. Sorry if I can't say that right. It's Bastian, right? that's his name. That's his like boyfriend Bastian, and he's like a doctor and he treats him so well, and he can actually like be in public with a boyfriend and like nobody cares in Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam he meets Jack Smoot, which is the guy that was with Sean in the beginning with his mom, the guy that like survived when Sean got killed by his own father. And it's like so crazy because then like Jack actually like hits on Cyril, and it's like, oh my god, dude, if only you knew that that kid that you're hitting on right now is the one that was the baby being born when your boyfriend died. It's just crazy, dude. It's crazy. That whole part when Bastian and Cyril kind of decided to take in Ignac as their own, found him one night sleeping outside of their house, and he was just a boy. He was only like 15, and they decided to like take him in even though they thought like maybe he's gonna rob us and stuff. And then he ended up like being their son kind of for years, and it was just so beautiful to see their relationship. And like Ignac was sold into prostitution by his father. Like, oh my god, when it was revealed that that guy was his dad, I was just like, what the fuck. But yeah, and then there was that scene when Ignac's father came back and he was trying to take him back like into prostitution, and they were like, no, we're not gonna let you do that, whatever. And then Jack Smoot freaking killed his dad. I was like, what the fuck? And then we jump to 80s New York, where him and Bastian had to move there because he got a job opportunity to be a doctor in New York because the AIDS epidemic was breaking out. And like the people there, the patients that were straight that had AIDS were so fucking rude, and they were just like, the way I see it, this is the beginning of the end of the world, and it's you people who my people have to thank for it. Why were people so insistent upon like putting gays into their own thing? Like, they're not like us, you know? Like, god, people are so homophobic, it drives me insane. So this is where the book started to get real fucking emotional for me, because they said that there's a patient in this hospital that has AIDS, and he's from Ireland, and he doesn't want his family to know because he's straight, and people are associating this AIDS disease with, you know, being gay, and so he didn't want his family to know. So then, of course, he goes in to see that patient because Cyril like volunteers at the hospital where Bastian works, and of course, it's Julian. And Julian is in the hospital dying of AIDS. And then came for the real plot twist, because Julian is like, I know that you had sex with Alice before you got married. And he was like, how would you know that? And he's like, because you didn't just leave her with nothing, you left her with a son. Cyril had no idea this whole time that Alice had had his baby, and she named him Liam. Cyril has a son. Like, oh my god, that was the biggest plot twist. I didn't see it coming. I don't know why. I was just like, what? Oh my god, like, Cyril just missed out on so much with him, you know? And it was so sad because, like, by this point, Liam was a teenager, you know? Like, he had no idea. It's been, like, 14 years or something since he left. Oh my god, that scene when he's, like, literally holding Julian in his arms as he's, like, dying from the AIDS was, like, so heartbreaking. He goes with Bastian to walk home, and he makes the mistake of not taking a taxi home. He's like, let's just go walk through Central Park. And then he like breaks down crying at Central Park, and so Bastian goes to like comfort him. And then this group of guys is like, hey, faggots. And then they go and beat the shit out of both of them, and Bastian dies that same night that Julian dies. Cyril lost two of the men he cared most about in this world on the same night. He lost his boyfriend the same way in the beginning that Jack lost his boyfriend to violence. So then, of course, it jumps forward like a couple years after this because it's just so depressing, and he goes to Miss Goggins' retirement party, which he still doesn't know is his birth mother, and he has this like conversation with her about her son Jonathan and how he's a psychiatrist now, and he's like getting married, and he's like, yeah, I actually have a son too, Liam, he's 20. He talks about how Liam like doesn't really like want him in his life, and he's had a really complicated relationship with him because, you know, Liam's kind of pissed that he was never there for him, even though Cyril never knew about him. And then that was sad too towards the end of the book when Charles, his adoptive father, died in the house from brain cancer. That was so beautiful to see Ignac go on and become an actual author, and like that was so cool. And like Ignac really like stayed his son even after Bastian died and everything. Like Ignac was his like adopted son, you know, and he took care of him, and then Ignac and Liam became friends. So like his actual birth son and his adopted son Ignac became friends, and they were just like so cute. And that was so beautiful when Liam was having a son at the end, and then Liam named his son Julian. Like, fucking kill me. And then finally, there's that scene at the end when when Cyril sees his birth mother and they're like, they run into each other again for like the millionth time, and then they're talking in the church, and she said that she just lost her son Jonathan, like her son died, and she's like trying to deal with it, and then he's like, oh, that's so terrible, and he's like, you don't have any other kids, and she's like, oh, well, I did have one kid, but I put him up for adoption, whatever. And then he like gets this weird idea because he's like, well, I was adopted, and like he's like, then he's like, what was the birthday of that kid? And then she like looks at him, and then it just like jumps ahead a couple years, and I'm like, oh my god, they finally found out. And then he gets to like finally live this amazing life with his mother now that he's in his 50s and she's like in her 70s or something. And they were just talking about how screwed up Ireland is, and he's like, and I love when she says this quote when she's like, the women are always the whores and the priests are always the good men who were led astray. The hypocrisy, of course, like the priests are the good ones who were led astray, and the women are the whores because they should know better, right? Like, why do we hold women to such a higher standard? That was so sweet at the end when Cyril started having these like hallucinations that he was talking to like Julian again. He found out that he was dying from a brain tumor just like his adoptive father Charles, and so he had these hallucinations of Charles talking to him and being like, oh, looks like you are real Avery because you're dying of brain cancer just like me. That final scene when he's like watching his mother get married, like finally, like his mother's happy, and he realizes that for the first time in his life he's finally happy even though he's dying of a brain tumor, and he knows that this is it for him. That ending was just so beautiful. Like that last line, like I highlighted that whole like last page, but when that last line when he's like, I realized that I was finally happy. That was so beautiful. This book just gave me all the feels, and I love it so much, and I think that this book is definitely something that's going to stay on my mind for a really long time, and I loved it. Sorry this video is so long. Have you read this book? What are your thoughts on it? I just think that this is such an incredibly important story. This was just a very heart-wrenching read, and it was so amazing. It was so good. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and let's talk about it in the comments. I'll see you guys next time.